The arena was alive. It pulsed with energy, a cacophony of strange sounds and flashing lights that made Emily Carter feel like she had stepped into some surreal nightmare. The air smelled metallic, tinged with something sharp and unfamiliar. Her heart pounded in her chest as she stood at the center of the massive structure, surrounded by towering walls that glowed faintly blue. Above her, thousands of alien creatures filled the stands, their forms shifting and shimmering under pulsating neon lights. They were cheering, roaring, clicking, making noises she couldn't even begin to understand. Emily tightened her grip on the plasma rifle in her hands. It felt heavy, foreign. She wasn't trained for this. Back on Earth, she had been an engineer, someone who worked with machines and equations, not weapons. But here, on this distant planet called Zarnuk 7, none of that mattered. All that mattered now was survival. She glanced around, trying to steady her breathing. The ground beneath her feet was uneven, covered in patches of dark sand and jagged rocks. It looked like no one cared about making the arena comfortable for its participants. And why would they? This wasn't a fair competition. It was a fight to the death. Her opponent emerged from the shadows on the far side of the arena. At first, Emily thought it might be another human. But then she saw it clearly, a towering insectoid creature with 6 legs, a segmented body, and glowing green eyes that seemed to pierce right through her. Its exoskeleton gleamed in the dim light, reflecting the flashes of color from above. Long razor-sharp limbs extended outward, twitching slightly as if eager to strike. Emily swallowed hard. This thing was built for killing. She could see it in every movement, every subtle shift of its body. There was no hesitation, no fear, just raw, primal instinct. The crowd erupted into cheers again, louder this time. Emily didn't need to understand their language to know what they wanted. Blood. Entertainment. Death. She clenched her jaw, forcing herself to focus. If she let fear take over, she was already dead. Slowly, she raised the rifle, aiming it at the creature's midsection. Her finger hovered over the trigger, but she hesitated. Was she really ready to do this? To kill another living being? A voice boomed overhead, cutting through the noise of the crowd. It spoke in a guttural alien tongue, but the message was clear enough. The announcer was introducing the combatants, hyping up the crowd for the battle ahead. Emily caught fragments of words translated into broken English through a crackling speaker system. Human, challenger, followed by a series of clicks and growls that likely referred to her opponent. Then came the countdown. 3 loud tones echoed through the arena, each one sending a jolt of adrenaline coursing through Emily's veins. When the final tone sounded, the creature lunged forward with terrifying speed. Emily barely had time to react. She fired a shot, the blast of energy sizzling past the creature's head as it dodged effortlessly. Her second shot missed entirely, hitting the wall behind it. Instead, the recoil from the weapon jarred her arms, throwing off her aim. Panic began to creep in. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She had imagined herself calm, calculating, precise. But reality was far messier than imagination. The creature circled her now, moving with unnatural grace. Its movements were fluid, almost hypnotic. Emily spun in place, keeping the rifle trained on it as best she could. Sweat dripped down her face, stinging her eyes. She blinked rapidly, trying to clear her vision. Another shot rang out, this one grazing the creature's side. It let out a high-pitched screech, rearing back momentarily before charging again. Emily stumbled backward, tripping over a loose rock. She hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the wind out of her lungs. For a split second, everything went still, and then the creature was on top of her, its claws inches from her throat. Emily squeezed her eyes shut, bracing for the inevitable. But the blow never came. Instead, there was silence. Not complete silence, the crowd was still shouting, still screaming, but relative silence compared to the chaos of moments before. Emily opened her eyes cautiously, half expecting to see the creature poised to strike. Instead, it stood frozen, its head tilted curiously to one side. For reasons she couldn't explain, Emily lowered her weapon. The gesture felt automatic, instinctual. Maybe it was the way the creature had paused, as if confused or unsure. Or maybe it was the realization that she didn't want to become like them, to turn into someone who killed without thought or remorse. Whatever the reason, she let the rifle slip from her fingers, clattering onto the ground beside her. The crowd went wild, their cheers deafening. To them, this must have looked like surrender, weakness, entertainment. But Emily knew better. Dropping her weapon wasn't an act of defeat. It was a choice. A small, defiant stand against the brutality of this place. Unfortunately, defiance didn't guarantee safety. As the creature stared at her, unmoving, Emily realized she might have just signed her own death warrant. 14 seconds later, the horn blared, signaling the end of the match. The creature backed away slowly, its glowing eyes never leaving hers. Emily stayed where she was, trembling but alive. She didn't know it yet, but this moment would change everything. The arena fell silent as the horn signaled the end of the match. Emily sat on the ground, her chest rising and falling with each labored breath. Her hands trembled as she reached for the plasma rifle beside her, but she stopped herself. Picking it up felt wrong now, like trying to hold on to something that no longer belonged to her. The crowd above was still cheering, their voices echoing in a strange mix of excitement and mockery. Emily didn't look up at them. She couldn't bear to see their faces or whatever passed for faces among the aliens, twisted in glee over her near-death experience. Guards appeared moments later, their armored forms casting long shadows across the arena floor. They moved quickly, surrounding Emily and her opponent. One of them barked an order in a guttural language she didn't understand, but the meaning was clear enough. It was time to leave. Emily forced herself to stand, wincing as pain shot through her legs. She had landed hard when she fell, and bruises were already forming beneath her tattered combat suit. Still, she managed to stay upright, clutching her side as the guards ushered her toward a narrow tunnel leading out of the arena. Her opponent, the insectoid creature, was escorted in the opposite direction. As it disappeared into the shadows, Emily caught one last glimpse of its glowing green eyes. There was something unreadable in them, a flicker of curiosity or maybe even confusion. For a brief moment, she wondered if it had understood what she had done. Had it recognized her act of surrender? Or was it just another mindless fighter, programmed to kill without thought? She shook her head, pushing the questions aside. It didn't matter now. What mattered was surviving the next round. The guards led Emily down a series of dimly lit corridors, their footsteps echoing against cold metal walls. The air smelled damp here, laced with the faint scent of rust. Eventually, they arrived at a small holding cell. The door slid open with a hiss, and Emily stepped inside reluctantly. The room was sparse, a cot bolted to the wall, a sink, and nothing else. No windows, no distractions. Just four walls closing in around her. The door slammed shut behind her, leaving her alone with her thoughts. Emily sank onto the cot, her body aching from the fight. She replayed the events in her mind, analyzing every move, every decision. Dropping her weapon had been reckless, she knew that. But it had also felt necessary, like a line she refused to cross. If she had pulled the trigger, would she have won? Probably. But at what cost? Killing that creature wouldn't have brought her any closer to escaping this place. It wouldn't have undone the fact that she was trapped, far from home, fighting for her life in a game she never asked to play. As the hours passed, exhaustion began to take its toll. Emily's eyelids grew heavy, and her thoughts drifted in and out of focus. She wasn't sure how much time had passed when she heard the sound of footsteps approaching her cell. At first, she thought it was another guard coming to check on her. But when the door opened, it wasn't a guard who stepped inside. It was a man. He was tall and scruffy, with short brown hair and a face lined by years of hardship. His clothes were worn and patched, clearly not designed for comfort. He carried himself with a casual confidence, leaning against the doorframe as if he owned the place. "You're new here," he said, his voice low and steady. It wasn't a question. Emily nodded cautiously, unsure of what to say. Something about him made her uneasy, not in a threatening way, but in a way that suggested he knew more than he was letting on. "Who are you?" she asked finally, her voice hoarse from disuse. "Jake Miller," he replied, stepping further into the kale. "Cell, and you're Emily Carter." "I've been watching you since you got here," Emily frowned. "Watching me? Yeah." Jake leaned against the wall opposite her, folding his arms across his chest. "They don't bring humans here often. When they do, it's usually big news, especially someone like you." "Someone like me?" Emily echoed, raising an eyebrow. "What's that supposed to mean?" Jake shrugged. "You're different. Most people come in screaming, begging for mercy. You dropped your weapon. That doesn't happen often." Emily looked away, staring at the floor. She hadn't expected anyone to notice, let alone comment on it. "It was stupid," she muttered. "I almost died because of it." "Maybe," Jake admitted, "but it got you noticed. And trust me, getting noticed can be a good thing or a very bad one, depending on how you play your cards." Emily glanced back at him, suspicion creeping into her expression. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I want to help," Jake said simply. "Look, I've been stuck in this hellhole for 3 years. I know how it works. The fights, the crowds, the rules, they're all part of the show. These aliens don't care about honor or skill. They care about drama, pain, suffering. If you can give them that, you might live long enough to figure out a way out of here." "A way out?" Emily repeated, her voice tinged with disbelief. "You mean escape?" Jake nodded. "Yeah, it's not easy, but it's possible. I've been working on it for a while now. Problem is, I need someone I can trust. Someone who's willing to take risks." Emily hesitated, weighing his words carefully. On one hand, Jake's offer sounded too good to be true. How could anyone plan an escape from a place like this? On the other hand, she didn't have many options. Staying meant continuing to fight until she either died or broke completely. Leaving meant taking a chance, however slim it might be. Finally she spoke. "Why should I trust you?" Jake chuckled softly, a hint of sadness in his eyes. "You shouldn't. Not yet, anyway. But if we work together, maybe we can both get out of here alive." For a long moment, Emily said nothing. She studied Jake's face, searching for any sign of deception. All she found was weariness and determination. Whatever his motives, he seemed sincere. "Okay," she said finally. "What do I need to do?" Jake smiled faintly, though there was no joy in it. "First, you need to survive the next fight. And for that, you'll need to learn how to fight smarter, not harder." Over the next few hours, Jake explained the intricacies of the Galactic trials. He told her about the different opponents she might face, other humans, alien species, even machines designed to mimic combatants. He described the layout of the arena, pointing out hidden traps and mechanisms that could turn the tide of a battle. "The arena's rigged," he explained. "They control everything, the lights, the terrain, even the weapons. If you're lucky, you'll get a decent one. If not," he trailed off, letting the implications hang in the air. Emily listened intently, absorbing every detail. Some of it made sense. Other parts felt overwhelming. But one thing was clear, she couldn't rely on luck alone. She needed strategy, preparation, and most importantly, allies. Jake promised to teach her everything he knew, starting with basic combat techniques. "You're quick on your feet," he said. "That's good. But speed won't save you if you don't know where to aim." By the time Jake left her cell, Emily felt a spark of hope she hadn't felt in days. It was small, fragile, but it was there. As she lay back on the cot, staring at the ceiling, she allowed herself to imagine a future beyond Zarnak 7, a future where she wasn't just surviving, but living. It was a dangerous dream, one that could easily shatter under the weight of reality. But for now, it was enough to keep her going. 14 seconds had changed everything in the arena. Now Emily wondered if those same 14 seconds could change her fate entirely. The days that followed were a blur of training and exhaustion. Jake visited Emily every evening, sneaking into her cell with scraps of food and stolen supplies. He brought her small tools, pieces of wire, a broken blade, anything he could scavenge. From the maintenance tunnels. "You never know when something like this might come in handy," he said, handing her a thin metal rod one night. Emily didn't argue. She trusted Jake's instincts, even if she didn't fully understand his plans yet. Their training sessions took place late at night, in the narrow corridors outside Emily's cell. Jake had mapped out a route that avoided most of the guards, though they still had to move quickly and quietly. He taught her how to fight without relying on weapons, at least not the ones provided by their captors. "Those rifles are flashy, but they're unpredictable," he explained. "Half the time they jam or overheat. You need to know how to defend yourself with your hands, with whatever you can find." Emily struggled at first. Her movements were awkward, uncoordinated. She wasn't used to physical combat, and Jake's lessons pushed her body to its limits, but she was determined. Every bruise, every ache reminded her why she was doing this: to survive, to escape, to reclaim some semblance of control over her life. Slowly she began to improve. Her strikes became sharper, her reflexes faster. Jake nodded approvingly during one session, saying, "Not bad, you're learning." But it wasn't just about fighting. Jake also drilled her on the layout of the arena, showing her diagrams he had sketched on scraps of paper. "This section here?" He pointed to a jagged line on the page. "It's rigged with heat traps. Step too close, and you'll burn your feet off. And over here," he tapped another area, "there's a pressure plate that triggers spikes from the ground. They love those kinds of surprises." Emily studied the sketches carefully, committing every detail to memory. It was overwhelming at times, the sheer number of hazards, the complexity of the systems, but she knew it was crucial. Understanding the arena gave her an edge, however small. "How do you know all this?" she asked one night. Jake hesitated before answering. "I've been here a long time. I've seen enough matches to pick up on patterns. Plus, I've had help." He didn't elaborate, and Emily didn't press him. She sensed there were parts of Jake's story he wasn't ready to share, secrets buried deep beneath his tough exterior. As the next match approached, Emily grew more anxious. Her opponent this time would be another human, a man named Alex Rivera. Jake told her about him during one of their sessions. "He's been here almost as long as I have," Jake said. "Good fighter, smart guy, but he's got a temper. Watch out for that." "What happens if I win?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake shrugged. "You live to fight another day, same as always. And if I lose?" "You don't want to think about that." Emily didn't sleep much the night before the match. She lay on her cot, staring at the ceiling, replaying Jake's lessons in her mind. What if she froze again? What if she couldn't bring herself to fight another human? The thought weighed heavily on her chest, making it hard to breathe. By the time the guards arrived to escort her to the arena, she felt like she hadn't slept at all. When she stepped into the arena, the noise hit her like a wall. The crowd was louder than ever, their cheers deafening. Emily scanned the space, taking note of the terrain. It was different this time, rockier, with more obstacles scattered around. She spotted Alex standing on the far side, his posture tense, He looked older than she expected, with graying hair and tired eyes. For a moment, their gazes met, and Emily saw something familiar in his expression. Fear. The announcer's voice boomed overhead, introducing them both. Emily tuned it out, focusing instead on the countdown. 3 tones echoed through the arena, each one sending a jolt of adrenaline coursing through her veins. When the final tone sounded, Alex moved first, circling her cautiously. His movements were deliberate, calculated. Unlike her previous opponent, he wasn't trying to intimidate her. He was sizing her up, looking for weaknesses. Emily mirrored his movements, keeping her distance. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. She remembered Jake's advice: anticipate, adapt, survive. As Alex closed the gap between them, she noticed a flicker of anger in his eyes. He lunged forward suddenly, swinging a fist toward her face. Emily ducked, narrowly avoiding the blow, and countered with a quick strike to his ribs. Alex stumbled back, surprised by her speed. "Stop," he shouted, holding up a hand. "We don't have to do this." Emily froze, caught off guard. "What? This is insane," Alex continued, his voice rising. "They're using us, don't you see that? We're nothing but pawns in their twisted game." For a moment, Emily didn't know what to say. She wanted to believe him, to agree that none of this made sense. But she also knew they couldn't just walk away. "Not here, not now. I don't want to fight either," she said finally. "But if we don't, they'll kill us both." Alex shook his head, frustration etched across his face. There has to be another way. Before Emily could respond, the crowd erupted into angry shouts. Apparently, their refusal to fight wasn't entertaining enough. A loud horn blared, signaling a warning. If neither of them attacked soon, the arena itself would intervene. Emily glanced around nervously, searching for a solution. That's when she remembered Jake's words. The arena's rigged. An idea began to form in her mind. It was risky, reckless even, but it might work. Without hesitation, she reached into her pocket and pulled out the small device Jake had given her, a modified EMP generator designed to disrupt electronic systems. She pressed the button, holding her breath as sparks flew from the walls and lights flickered wildly. Chaos erupted around them as parts of the arena collapsed, sending debris tumbling to the ground. "What did you do?" Alex yelled, shielding his face from falling dust. "I'm getting us out of here," Emily replied, grabbing his arm. "Come on." Together, they sprinted toward the nearest exit, dodging falling rocks and bursts of energy. The crowd roared in outrage, their screams drowned out by the sound of destruction. Emily didn't look back. She kept running, her legs burning with effort, until they reached the tunnel leading out of the arena. Behind them, alarms blared, red lights flashing urgently. Guards appeared moments later, shouting orders in alien languages. "They're onto us," Alex warned, glancing over his shoulder. "We're not stopping," Emily shot back, pulling him forward. "Not now." They emerged into the underground labyrinth of tunnels where Jake was waiting for them. His face lit up with relief when he saw them. "Took you long enough," he teased, motioning for them to follow him. The 3 of them ran together, navigating the maze-like passages with practiced ease. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew louder. Guards were closing in, their heavy boots pounding against the metal floors. "This way," Jake called, turning down a narrow corridor. At the end of it, they found a hidden door leading to the surface. Beyond it, a shuttle bay stretched out. Before them, filled with ships of various shapes and sizes. Emily's heart leapt at the sight. Freedom was within reach, but they weren't safe yet. As they sprinted toward the nearest ship, a group of guards appeared, blocking their path. Jake cursed under his breath, pulling out a makeshift weapon, a sharpened piece of pipe. "Cover me," he said, charging forward. Emily and Alex followed. fighting desperately to hold off the guards while Jake worked to disable the ship's locking mechanism. Bullets whizzed past them, ricocheting off the walls. Emily ducked behind a crate, her mind racing. This was it, their last chance. If they failed now, everything they had done would be for nothing. Finally, Jake shouted, "Got it. Let's go." They scrambled aboard the ship, slamming the hatch shut behind them. Emily took the controls, her hands trembling as she powered up the engines. Outside, the guards pounded on the hull, shouting furiously. But it was too late. With a roar of thrust, the ship lifted off, leaving Zarnok 7 and the horrors of the arena far behind. As they soared into space, Emily allowed herself a moment of quiet relief. They had made it. Against all odds, they had escaped. But she knew their journey was far from over. Whatever lay ahead, she was ready to face it, with courage, with determination, and with the hope that someday, somehow she would find her way home. The stolen ship trembled as it broke free from the planet's atmosphere. Leaving behind the chaos of Zarnok 7, Emily gripped the controls tightly, her knuckles white from the strain. The dashboard in front of her was a mess of blinking lights and unfamiliar symbols, but she managed to keep the ship steady. Outside the cockpit window, the stars stretched endlessly, cold and distant. For the first time in what felt like forever, Emily allowed herself to breathe deeply. They were safe for now. Behind her, Jake and Alex sat in silence, their faces pale with exhaustion. Neither of them spoke, as if afraid to break the fragile peace that had settled over the cabin. Jake leaned back in his seat, closing his eyes. For a moment, his scruffy face looked even wearier than usual, the lines around his mouth deeper, his hair matted with sweat. Alex, on the other hand, stared out the window, his hands clenched into fists. He seemed lost in thought, his expression unreadable. "We need to figure out where we're going," Emily said finally, breaking the silence. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, hoarse and shaky, like it belonged to someone else. Jake opened one eye, glancing at her. "First things first," he replied. "We need to make sure no one's following us." Emily nodded, scanning the radar screen nervously. So far, there was no sign of pursuit, but she knew better than to relax. Their escape had been loud, chaotic, a beacon for anyone who wanted to chase them down. "What about fuel?" she asked. "How long can this thing last?" "Not long," Jake admitted. "These shuttles aren't built for long-distance travel. We'll need to find a refueling station. Or another ship soon." Alex turned his head sharply, speaking for the first time since they'd left the arena. "And then what? We just keep running? Hiding? Do you really think they'll let us go that easily?" Jake sighed, rubbing his temples. "No, they won't, but running is better than being dead. Trust me, I've seen what happens when people stop fighting." Emily glanced at Alex in the rearview mirror. His anger was palpable, radiating off him in waves. She understood why. He had spent years trapped in the same nightmare she was only beginning to wake up from. But now wasn't the time for arguments. "We'll figure it out," she said firmly. "One step at a time." For the next several hours, they worked together to stabilize the ship. Jake tinkered with the engine, muttering under his breath as he patched up damaged components. Alex helped where he could, though his movements were stiff, mechanical. Emily stayed at the controls, keeping an eye on their surroundings. Every flash of light outside the window made her heart skip a beat. Every blip on the radar sent her pulse racing, but nothing appeared to be chasing them. At least not yet. As the adrenaline began to fade, Emily's thoughts drifted back to the arena. She couldn't shake the image of the insectoid creature tilting its head, pausing before striking. Or the look in Alex's eyes when he begged her not to fight. What had driven him to give up? Was it despair, hopelessness, or something more? She wanted to ask, but the timing didn't feel right. Not while they were still so close to danger. Eventually, Jake emerged from the engine room, wiping grease-stained hands on his pants. "Good news," he announced. "I fixed the main thruster. Bad news, we're almost out of fuel." "How? Much farther can we go?" Emily asked. "Maybe a few more hours," Jake replied. "After that, we're grounded." Emily frowned, turning her attention back to the navigation panel. There weren't many options within range. Most of the nearby systems were either uninhabited or controlled by hostile factions. Then she spotted something, a small outpost listed on the map. It wasn't much, but it might have supplies. "There," she said, pointing to the screen. "If we push it, we can reach that outpost before the fuel runs out." Jake nodded approvingly. "Good call. Let's hope whoever's there isn't trigger happy." They set a course for the outpost, the tension in the cabin easing slightly. As the ship hummed steadily through space, Emily found herself thinking about Earth. She hadn't realized how much she missed it until now. The smell of fresh air, the sound of birds chirping, the simple act of walking outside without fear. Would she ever see it again? Or was home just another dream she'd have to leave behind? Hours later, the outpost came into view. It was a modest structure floating in the void, surrounded by debris and abandoned ships. A neon sign flickered above the entrance, reading "Refuel and Repair." Emily guided the ship toward a docking bay, her hands steady despite the knot of anxiety in her stomach. When they landed, Jake grabbed a makeshift weapon, a length of pipe he'd brought from the engine room, and motioned for the others to follow him. "Stay alert," he warned. "Places like this are magnets for trouble." The trio stepped out of the ship cautiously, their boots echoing against the metal floor of the docking bay. The air inside smelled stale, tinged with oil and rust. Shadows loomed in every corner, and the faint hum of machinery filled the silence. No one greeted them, which wasn't surprising. Outposts like this weren't exactly known for hospitality. Jake led the way to the main building, pushing open a creaky door. Inside, a lone figure sat behind a counter, tinkering with a piece of equipment. He looked up as they entered, his eyes narrowing suspiciously. "What do you want?" he growled, his voice rough and gravelly. "Fuel," Jake replied bluntly. "And maybe some food, if you've got any." The man studied them for a moment, his gaze lingering on Emily's tattered combat suit. "You look like you've been through hell," he remarked. "What happened?" "Get kicked out of the Galactic." "Trials?" Emily stiffened, exchanging a quick glance with Jake. "Something like that," she muttered. The man chuckled dryly. "Happens more often than you'd think. Folks come here all the time, looking to disappear. You planning to stick around?" "No," Jake answered quickly. "Just passing through." The man shrugged, standing up slowly. "Suit yourself. Fuel's expensive, though. And I don't take credits. What do you take?" Alex asked, stepping forward. "Barter," the man replied. "Skills, goods, information, whatever you've got." Jake hesitated, glancing at Emily. They didn't have much to trade, not anymore. All they had were the clothes on their backs and the weapons they carried. Finally, he spoke. "We've got tech, advanced stuff." "Stolen from Zarnuk 7. The man raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Zarnuk 7, huh? That's bold. Show me what you've got." Jake handed over the EMP device Emily had used to sabotage the arena. The man examined it carefully, nodding in approval. "Not bad. This'll cover your fuel and a bit extra. Help yourselves to whatever you need." While Jake negotiated, Emily and Alex explored the outpost. It was smaller than it looked from the outside, consisting of a few rooms stocked with supplies. They found canned food, water, and medical kits, enough to keep them going for a while. In one corner, there was a pile of old clothes and blankets. Emily picked out a jacket, pulling it on gratefully. It wasn't much, but it was warmer than the thin fabric of her combat suit. When they returned to the docking bay, Jake was waiting for them, a satisfied look on his face. "Got everything we need," he said. "Let's get moving before someone shows up asking questions." Back aboard the ship, Emily took her place at the controls once again. As they prepared to leave the outpost, Alex spoke up. "So where to now?" Jake exchanged a glance with Emily before answering. "There's a rebel network operating in the Outer Rim. If anyone can help us expose what's happening on Zarnak 7, it's them." Emily nodded, feeling a spark of determination ignite within her. They weren't just survivors anymore, they were fighters. And they had a mission: to bring justice to those responsible for the horrors of the Galactic trials. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. As the ship soared into the vastness of space, Emily stared out the window, her resolve hardening. 14 seconds had changed her fate once. Now she vowed to change the fate of countless others. The journey to the Outer Rim was long and tense. Emily, Jake, and Alex took turns at the controls, trying to conserve fuel while keeping an eye out for any signs of pursuit. The stolen ship groaned under the strain of constant travel, its systems barely holding together. Every creak and shudder reminded them how fragile their escape truly was. Still, they pressed on, driven by the hope that somewhere in the vastness of space, there was a chance to fight back. As the days passed, the three of them began to settle into a rhythm. Jake spent most of his time tinkering with the ship's engine, coaxing a little more life out of the battered machinery. He worked methodically, muttering to himself as he patched leaks and replaced burned-out components. Alex helped where he could, though his mood remained dark and brooding. He rarely spoke unless necessary, retreating into himself whenever the silence grew too heavy. Emily tried to bridge the gap between them, offering small talk or sharing stories from her life on Earth, but Alex's responses were usually short and clipped. Despite the tension, Emily found herself growing closer to Jake. There was something comforting about his steady presence, his calm demeanor even in the face of uncertainty. One night, as they floated in the quiet emptiness of space, Emily asked him a question that had been lingering in her mind. "Why did you stay?" she said softly. "After all these years, why didn't you try to escape sooner?" Jake paused, his hands resting on the edge of the control panel. For a moment, he didn't answer. Then he sighed, leaning back in his seat. "I wanted to," he admitted. "But it's not easy. You saw what happened when we left guards chasing us, alarms blaring. They don't let people just walk away, and if you fail..." He trailed off, shaking his head. "It's not pretty." Emily nodded, understanding the weight of his words. "So why now? Why me?" Jake glanced at her, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Because you're different. Most people who end up in the trials lose themselves pretty quickly. They become animals, fighting for survival no matter the cost. But you dropped your weapon. That takes guts. Or stupidity, depending on how you look at it." Emily chuckled nervously. "Maybe both. Maybe," Jake agreed. "But it gave me hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, we could actually pull this off." Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden alarm blaring through the cabin. Emily's heart leapt into her throat as red lights flashed across the dashboard. "What is it?" she asked, panic creeping into her voice. Jake leaned forward, scanning the instruments. "We've got company." Outside the window, a shadow loomed, a sleek black ship closing in fast. Its design was unmistakably alien, angular and menacing. Weapons bristled along its hull, glinting ominously in the starlight. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. This wasn't a random encounter. They had been tracked. "They must have tagged our ship before we left," Jake muttered, slamming his fist against the console. "Damn it, what do we do?" Alex demanded, appearing in the doorway behind them. His face was pale, but his eyes burned with determination. "We fight," Jake replied grimly, "or we die trying." The pursuing ship fired a warning shot, the blast narrowly missing their engines. Emily gripped the controls tightly, her knuckles white. "Hold on," she shouted, yanking the ship into a sharp turn. The maneuver sent them spiraling wildly, throwing everyone off balance. Outside, the enemy ship adjusted its course, matching. Their erratic movements with terrifying precision. Jake scrambled to arm the ship's defenses, flipping switches and pressing buttons frantically. "We've got one missile left," he announced. "If we can hit their engines, we might be able to disable them. And if we miss?" Alex asked. "Then we're screwed." Emily swallowed hard, focusing on the task ahead. She couldn't afford to hesitate, not now. As the enemy ship lined up for another shot, she spun the controls, weaving through debris fields and asteroid clusters. Pieces of rock shattered against their hull, sending shockwaves rippling through the cabin. Behind her, Jake counted down the seconds until they reached optimal firing range. "Now!" he yelled. Emily steadied the ship, holding her breath as Jake launched the missile. For a moment, everything seemed to slow down. The projectile streaked across the void, trailing smoke and fire. Then it struck home, slamming into the enemy ship's engine array with a brilliant explosion. The alien vessel veered off course, its weapons falling silent. "Yes!" Jake exclaimed, pumping his fist in triumph, but their relief was short-lived. Even as the enemy ship drifted away, damaged but still operational, Emily noticed something alarming. Their own ship's systems were failing rapidly, overloaded by the stress of combat. Warning lights blinked furiously across the dashboard, accompanied by a series of loud, ominous clicks. "We're losing power," she said, her voice tight with fear. Jake cursed under his breath, rushing back to the engine room. "I'll see what I can do. Just keep us steady." Emily nodded, gripping the controls with renewed determination. She guided the ship toward a nearby asteroid field, hoping to use the rocky terrain as cover. The enemy ship lingered in the distance, watching, but unable to pursue. For now they were safe, but only just hours later. Jake emerged from the engine room, his face streaked with grease and sweat. "We're stable for now," he reported. "But we need to find a place to land soon. We can't keep running like this." Emily nodded, scanning the navigation panel for options. On the edge of the screen, she spotted a faint signal, a distress beacon emanating from a remote planet. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. "There," she said, pointing to the map. "Let's check it out." When they arrived, the planet turned out to be barren and desolate, its surface covered in jagged cliffs and endless sand dunes. But nestled in a valley below, they found a cluster of makeshift buildings, a hidden settlement. As they approached, armed figures stepped out to meet them, their faces obscured by helmets and scarves. "Who are you?" one of them demanded, raising a weapon. "We're survivors," Emily replied, stepping forward cautiously. "From Zarnok 7. At the mention of the name, the figure lowered their guns slightly, exchanging a glance with their companions. "Follow us," they said after a moment. Inside the settlement, they were taken to a large tent where a woman waited. She was older, with sharp features and piercing eyes that seemed to see right through them. "You've come far," she said, her voice low and commanding. "Tell me everything." Over the next hour, Emily recounted their story, the abduction, the arena, the escape. The woman listened intently, nodding occasionally, but saying little. When Emily finished, the woman leaned back in her chair, studying them carefully. "You're lucky to be alive," she said finally. "Most who leave Zarnok 7 don't make it this far. Are you part of the rebel network?" Jake asked. The woman smiled faintly. "Something like that. We call ourselves the Outriders. We fight against the systems that enslave others, the arenas, the trials, the exploitation. If you want to join us, you'll need to prove yourselves." "How?" Alex asked, speaking for the first time since landing. "There's a facility nearby," the woman explained. "A research outpost used to harvest genetic material from prisoners. Destroy it, and you'll have earned your place among us." Emily exchanged a glance with Jake and Alex. The mission sounded dangerous, almost impossible. But it also represented a chance to strike back, to dismantle the very system that had nearly destroyed them. "We'll do it," she said firmly. The woman nodded, satisfied. "Good. You leave at dawn." That night, as they prepared for the mission, Emily found herself staring at the stars once again. So much had changed in such a short time. She had gone from being a prisoner in an alien arena to becoming part of a rebellion. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with risks and sacrifices. But for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt like she was fighting for something bigger than herself. Beside her, Jake rested a hand on her shoulder. "You ready for this?" he asked quietly. Emily looked at him, then at Alex, who stood nearby, sharpening a blade. "Yeah," she said, a determined smile spreading across her face. "Let's finish what we started." Tomorrow they would destroy the facility and take the first step toward changing the galaxy forever. The next morning, the Outriders provided Emily, Jake, and Alex with basic weapons and supplies for their mission. The facility they were targeting wasn't far, but it was heavily guarded. Armed drones patrolled the perimeter, and automated turrets lined the walls. The Outriders' leader had given them a map of the compound, marking key points, entrances, security hubs, and the main lab where the genetic material was processed. "Take out the power first," she had advised. "Blind them before you strike." As they approached the facility under the cover of darkness, Emily felt her nerves tightening. She had never done anything like this before. Back on Earth, her life had been predictable, safe. Now she was sneaking into an alien stronghold, planning to blow it up. The thought made her stomach churn, but she pushed the fear aside. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about justice. They reached the outer fence quietly, crouching in the shadows. Jake pulled out a small device he'd scavenged from the outpost, a crude hacking tool, and connected it to the control panel near the gate. "Give me a minute," he whispered, his fingers moving quickly over the tiny screen. Moments later, there was a soft click, and the gate slid open, just wide enough for them to slip through. Inside, the facility loomed ahead, its structure angular and cold under the dim light of the planet's twin moons. Emily glanced around nervously, her hand gripping the makeshift rifle the Outriders had given her. So far, no alarms had gone off, but that could change in an instant. They moved cautiously, sticking to the shadows as they made their way toward the power station. When they reached the building housing the generators, Alex took point, using a crowbar to pry open a side door. Inside, rows of humming machines filled the room, pulsing with energy. "We need to disable all of them," Jake said, scanning the setup. "But we don't have much time. Once they notice the power's out, they'll send reinforcements." Emily nodded, pulling out a small explosive charge the Outriders had supplied. She placed it carefully on one of the main generators, setting the timer for 30 seconds. "Let's move," she said, backing away quickly. The others followed suit, planting charges on additional units. When they were clear, they ducked behind a stack of crates outside, waiting for the detonation. The explosion was deafening, sending a shockwave rippling through the air. Lights flickered and died across the compound, plunging the area into darkness. Alarms blared immediately, red strobes flashing erratically. Guards scrambled out of barracks, shouting orders in alien languages. Drones buzzed overhead, their searchlights cutting through the gloom. "Now!" Jake yelled, leading the way toward the main lab. Without power, the automated defenses were offline, giving them a brief window to act. They sprinted across the open ground, dodging panicked guards and bursts of gunfire. Emily's heart pounded in her chest as she ran, every step feeling like it might be her last. Reaching the lab, they found the entrance unguarded, but locked. Jake worked quickly, bypassing the electronic lock with his hacking tool. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing a sterile interior lit by emergency lights. Rows of tanks lined the walls, each containing glowing green liquid and floating samples of biological material. It was horrifying, the physical evidence of everything they had endured. "This is it," Alex muttered, his voice trembling with rage. "This is what they do to us." Emily didn't respond. She couldn't. Her mind was racing with images of the arena, of the insectoid creature, of the countless lives destroyed to fuel this operation. She set another explosive charge in the center of the room, making sure it would destroy everything. As the timer ticked down, they retreated hastily, retracing their steps through the chaos. By the time they reached the edge of the compound, the entire facility was ablaze. Flames licked at the night sky, casting an eerie glow over the landscape. Explosions echoed in the distance, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Emily, Jake, and Alex watched from a safe vantage point, catching their breath as the destruction unfolded. "We did it," Jake said finally, breaking the silence. There was awe in his voice, disbelief even. "We actually did it." Alex nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. For once, there was no anger in his eyes, only relief. "What now?" he asked. Emily looked at him, then at Jake. "Now we keep going. This is just the beginning." They returned to the Outriders' settlement as heroes. The rebels greeted them with cheers, slapping them on the back and offering food and water. The leader of the Outriders approached them personally, her sharp eyes gleaming with approval. "You've proven yourselves," she said. "Welcome to the fight." Over the following days, Emily, Jake, and Alex became part of the rebellion. They trained alongside other survivors, learning new skills and strategies to take down the systems that oppressed them. Emily discovered a strength within herself she hadn't known existed, a resilience born not just from necessity, but from purpose. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for everyone who had suffered at the hands of the Galactic trials. One evening, as they sat around a campfire sharing stories, Jake raised a question that had been lingering in all their minds. "What happens when this is over? When we've taken down Zarnalk 7 and exposed the truth?" Emily stared into the flames, thinking carefully before answering. "We go home," she said simply. "Not just to Earth for all of us. We find a way to rebuild, to make things right. To remind the galaxy that humanity isn't just about survival, it's about hope." Alex smiled faintly, nodding in agreement. "Sounds good to me." As the fire crackled softly, Emily allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. 14 seconds had changed her fate once. Now she realized those same 14 seconds had been the start of something bigger, a movement, a revolution. And though the road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges, she knew one thing for certain. She wouldn't stop until the arenas were empty, until no one else had to suffer the way she had. The stars above twinkled brightly, endless and vast. Somewhere out there, among the billions of worlds and possibilities, was a future worth fighting for. And Emily Carter intended to see it through to whatever end awaited her.